Like a lot of people will fight structure just because
It's
it,
structure.
yeah, well, not only that, it's structure that they did not come up with. It could be right, but some people, a large population of people will fight things that are right because they did not come up with it.
When you talk to, some black Christians about like chakras and, stones and things of that nature, and just understanding the power like of just being grounded with the earth, they look at you like, you done lost your damn mind.
My mother-in-law is a pastor, so trust me, I know.
The question for today's episode is, how do you view the world, linear or non-linear? Also, the guest for today's episode includes photographer Dondre George and Neuropace founder and host of the Misfits podcast, Mars.
Man, let's go ahead and crack this thing open. So the conversation that I want to have with you good gentlemen today is essentially going to be one that's transcendent in nature. I want you guys to challenge not just the way you think, but the way you see others in the world around you as well. How you see your brother, your mother, your father, even your children, and then the co-workers and even your current leaders. Everyone has aspirations of someday being that one calling the shots, if you're not already. And some of us yearn for a life of discipline that affords us the ultimate freedoms to do what we please without being bogged down by today's societal norms. And some of us have already achieved that. Today, for all of the listeners and viewers alike, we will be discussing your lens and how you see the world. Is it linear or non-linear? Or is it a mix of both? This is an essential conversation for every person or family because it will highlight the beauty of your thought, but it also highlight the flaws as well. Are you able to view things objectively, or are you limited to a lens tuned to just your realities and only that? Tap in with Mars, Dondre, and the Breakdown crew as we dive into yet another powerful topic that is without a doubt going to sharpen the tools in your arsenal. Let's do it.
And now to take a brief pause from today's episode for our Business of the Week segment. This week's Business of the Week is Ginger Ale by Carl Hale Jr. Ginger Ale specializes in ginger lemonade produced locally that allows you to capitalize on the health benefits of ginger, such as immune boosting, digestion aid, as well as easing menstrual pain. Their ginger lemonade comes in 5 flavors, of which matcha blueberry is my personal favorite. Check out their website to place your order today. Now back to the episode.
So I would say, I definitely don't see the world linear. I see it non-linear. If I get that correct, I believe that I talk about it this way when I talk about life with people, especially when we're talking about relationships. I say we're all on this journey through life, right? But it's like going through the woods. Sometimes you go into the woods with a partner or a friend, whoever it is, maybe, or a group of friends, right? But when you go through the woods, you're going to have some obstacles. And sometimes one of your friends is going to want to go this way and you're going to want to go that way, right? It's not, technically everybody's going through this wood, so that is technically linear. But the way you go through these woods is never going to be linear. It's always going to be different for you. You're going to have a different mindset on how to get there or how to get to the end. You're not always going to want people to leave you on your journey. You're going to want to leave some people on your journey. So that's how I view it. I view my journey through life non-linear, as in you never know what's going to happen while going through these woods. So it's basically how I look at it.
How would you say that influences your family life versus how it influences your actions in your work life?
I think family life's a little harder. I think family life should be seen a lot more linear. However, you're still those obstacles tend to knock you off of a linear path no matter what, because those are unexpected things. When you're talking linear, that's expected, right? On a freeway, you're going to be like, all right, it's going to go this way. And the only time it's not going to go this way is if I get out on the exit, right? And so that's not life. That's not being a family man as a husband. That's not being a brother, sister, friend, none of that. You know what I mean? None of that is going to be linear. So it impacts me because I'm able to know that it's not going to be so black and white and so easy, and then just kind of acknowledge that and know that there's going to be some problem solving along the way. The same goes for, I don't really like to, because my mindset should technically be the same, not the same in every situation, but I should have a general basis for my mindset with morals and all that kind of codes, shall I say, my own. And it's basically the same with family and in business, especially since my business is mental health advocacy and all that stuff. So I would want to be as me as possible when trying to provide advocacy for somebody to be as them as possible. So if that makes any sense, I still try to look at it all just to remind myself to look at it with a nonlinear view, especially when you're dealing with people that need help or assistance.
Dondre, what about you?
I honestly think that it is a combination, depending on how much focus you want to put onto it. So something I was thinking of when Des was talking about it, when we were doing math back in school, back in undergrad, we would look at like modern geometry, we would look at a curved surface. And on a curved surface, if I put a point A, and then point B, and I draw a line from point A to point B, if I zoom out enough, it's a curved line, which don't make much sense. It's a curve, but when I zoom out, but if I go and I shorten that and I'm on the plane of the curved surface and I look at point A to point B, when you zoom in that much, it's a straight line. And so it depends on how you want to look at the thing that's in front of you, whether it's life or whatnot. So when you talk linear, I'm thinking focus. And if you had asked me years ago when we first met, I might have said linear, because my mind was so focused on this is exactly what you have to do to get where you need to go, to achieve what you need to achieve. And now in my life, I'm like, it's a combination, and it's a lot more non-linear, because I can say that I want to achieve this goal. Let's say I want to, I don't know, the stereotypical, I want to make $100,000, right? I can say that, and I can say, well, the linear way to do that would be get a job that pays me $100,000. And if I don't have the requirements to get that job, I go get the requirements, and I keep tracing it back until I can take the next step forward, right? Mm-hmm. That's a linear way to put it. A non-linear way would say, well, who knows? Maybe one day doing something that I am passionate about, I'll meet somebody who puts me in connection with somebody who allows me to do a deal that I like. And it has nothing to do with this career path to make the $100,000, but I still make my $100,000, right? So I think it's definitely a combination. And when you allow yourself to kind of zoom out and see that you can still achieve your goal, and you might even be surprised by how you achieve it and how quickly you achieve it, and how against what you perceive needs to be done, it can still get done. That kind of justifies why I would say non-linear overall, but it definitely will be linear if you're zoomed in enough.
My question to you is, what caused the shift in paradigm from you being one that was strictly linear to a combination and leaning more non-linear today?
I can't say it was a specific point in time. I know you and I have talked about like a weight loss journey that I went through, because I think I was much bigger when I first met you, actually. So you kind of saw me through the before and after of all that. But what I say is, some of the things that I'm into now and some of the people that I collaborate with and some of the activities that I get into, those weren't a direct association because I lost weight, but the person that I became through that journey opened up those doors for me. Had nothing to do with weight loss, yet the person I became allowed me to even see that those were opportunities to be had. And if I had those opportunities as a goal back in 2017 when you and I met, I couldn't have linearly planned out how to achieve those in the way that they unfolded and allowed me to achieve those things. So that's why I say, that looking back, you see how perfect each instance was. But for you to become the coordinator of each of those events, it almost seems improbable.
Now, Mars, you didn't know Dondre back then. You just met him today. Mm-hmm. So just for your reference, Dondre's weight loss journey was not losing 20 pounds. Dondre, how much did you actually lose?
The total was so the total was about 70. Since then, I'm probably about 5 to 8 pounds less than that now at this point.
Well, congrats, man. Congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Congrats. Can I pose a question?
Of course.
I wanted to. So one thing you did that stood out to me was that you said linear means focus, right? And I think because that's one thing that helped you through your weight loss journey, which congrats, man. That's a lot of pounds, man.
Thank you.
That's definitely dedication. But like the one thing that I think you kind of came around to too, because you said it was both, right? Is that when you step back from that linearness, which means you start stepping out of being linear, you start being non-linear, right? To notice that linear ain't the best kind of way. And I think that for me, the reason I advocate for non-linear is because what happens when you're too focused?
Right.
You miss those things that you could have never, like you said, if I were to have had that as point B as an option or goal, I don't know if I would have been able to get there with the plan.
Right.
You know, but it was when I was non-linear or looked at it as non-linear later, you know what I mean? And I think that's why linear, there is definitely some, for me, there's definitely some benefits to being linear, but I think there's the more like being tunnel vision, like they tell you sometimes tunnel vision is good, but then sometimes tunnel vision helps you lose a lot of stuff, you miss a lot of stuff, like blessings and stuff that way too, you know. But that's just some side of that. I didn't mean to, but I just kind of, I heard that in there too, and I'm glad that you kind of found that. I'm first of all, congrats still again, because that's huge. First of all, that's dedication, man. That shows your mindset right there.
It won't always like that. I tell people all the time, like it wasn't just this is what I did and I decided to do it, so I did it. Like I wish it was that cut and dry and simple, because anybody who's trying to lose weight, whether it's 5 pounds or more, like you probably tried a bunch of times before then. It takes that special moment of circumstances to help cultivate that, and you know, allowing you to be like, I'm no longer the person that keeps this weight on. Now it's just a matter of time for y'all to see it too, kind of deal. I already know it's there. It's just a matter of me putting in the work to get it done, kind of deal. So when you change into that person and then you reflect on that, that's when I'm like, nah, there's no way I could have designed this. It was designed too perfectly for me to be able to design it myself. You know what I'm saying? Y'all were talking about art pieces, and I'm like, nope, it's gonna look like a mess when I draw it. It's gonna look like a mess when I paint it. Like it's gonna be a little bit of both. There's no way I could have designed this as perfectly as it came out.
Honestly, Dondre, your response with the recent shift is kind of surprising, being the fact that you're a numbers guy and you live in the world of statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you to have such a great appreciation for the nonlinear process, the nonlinear perspective, that was really interesting. What advantages would you say has that shifting that perspective allowed you in your day-to-day life?
I will say, specifically in my day-to-day life, like if I think the world is non-linear, but it's comprised of a bunch of linearities, depending on how deeply you want to look at it, I can pick the one that serves me the best. So we can take a situation like, crap, work wants me to go do something and I've never done it before. My life sucks. Why would they make me do something that I've never done before? I can say, I'm gonna learn this thing and get it done. Or somebody else might look at it and say, oh, y'all don't know how to do this? Bet I'm gonna be the subject matter expert on this and I'm gonna figure it out. All right. And then you're now you're now creating a role, which we all know happens in most jobs, is they say, hey, we want you to do X, Y, and Z, and you find a bunch of gaps and you could ignore the gaps, but if you do, it kind of causes more stress on you. So you learn something new. Next thing you know, people are coming to you for processes and things like that. So that's a very practical work example of like, I could be the one that complains about the opportunity in front of me, or I can have the perspective that's an opportunity. And then I can have the perspective that opportunity is something that benefits me, because not all opportunities benefit you. That's a whole nother discussion. But, and so being able to jump from one quote unquote linearity to another one allows me to see that from a lens that better serves me. So in my day-to-day, I think that happens a lot.
It sounds like better discernment in where exactly you apply your focus.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Because what you focus on, we can get into law of attraction type stuff. And oh, my bad. What was that, Mars?
My therapy dog. She always pops up and she likes to jump in the lap. Sorry.
See, now we focus on the therapy dog. And somebody, somebody might be upset.
Lay down.
It's the flow of the conversation, right?
Yes, sir.
So, there's prior to us kicking off season 6, you and I had met Josh as well, and we were talking through the final question draft. And I believe this question came about from Ray Dalio's principles, correct?
No, so it actually didn't. It actually came from a conversation I had with my godbrother. You know, I've introduced you guys like just from certain things that he's been working on, but my godbrother is actually like really one of the closest people to me. He's part of the reason why I have the political science degree. I was on track to go to law school, still on track, but you know, as you all know, life happens. But it actually was a conversation that we had over I think we had this draft like before Christmas, but it's a conversation that we've had a lot. Like we had the conversation back when I was in school, like OD when I was for a lot. Really like as linear or non-linear. It was just more or less understanding people and their reactions. Like every action has a reaction. So it was just things of that nature. And then we would have a lot of conversations like, you know, all throughout last year, like just his view on like cryptocurrency or his view on like the Kyrie situation or his views on just anything in general, and how I realized like his thought pattern was becoming more linear, and I think that's just a result of someone chasing their profession. But I think that he also was still very, very tapped in to that non-linear view of thought because he's a music producer as well, and music production is not a very linear process because what one person may feel from a beat or from a song that you're making may be completely different than what somebody else feels from that same exact song, that same exact snippet, and things of that nature. And so I've always realized, like, just from with him, like, even there may be times where he says something that I completely disagree with because it just seems like a one-dimensional way of viewing things. He always had the respect for someone else's opinion to be able to, okay, I can understand why you see it that way. It may not be the way that I agree with the most, but I can understand how you arrive at that conclusion. And I think that's the ultimate, you know, form of human respect, because not everyone sees life the same exact way. So he was really one of the people that sparked the conversation. But I will say that as I started, you know, getting more deeper into financial literacy, and Ray Dalio's principles was one of the things that like maybe put this question, like when I was like, okay, I'm ready to talk about it, over the edge. But this was really something that had been like stemming for a long time. And even then, it was conversations that you know I'll just have with my parents about like just life, like why my view is one way, why my dad's view is one way, why my mom's view is one way. Like me just being that middle child and being able to break down, like, okay, I can understand, you know, why you're viewing it this way, but have you ever thought about this? Same thing with my sister, same with my brother. Like it's like the gift and the burden of being the middle child is like you just naturally have this gift. And I don't want to say it's just, you know, specific to the middle child, but like I've always had this gift of being able to see everyone's perspective, even when they didn't necessarily articulate it. Like I would be able to watch their actions and be like, okay, I can see what your train of thought is. Like I got way more data collection from people by just watching them do things rather than hearing them say why they do it, and them ever giving me like an explanation, which is few and
typically
far
a more
between.
reliable indicator.
Yeah, exactly. So, I guess that's a perfect segue into me going. So, linear or non-linear? I will actually say that I am a mix of both. I will definitely say that if we want to talk about like a like a graph per se, or just which side I lean to more than the other, definitely more non-linear. Like just me being, like I said, the middle child, I've always had a way of seeing everyone's side, and I've always it's been a gift that I've tapped into over the years, but not passing judgment. Like I always try and understand what was going on in here that made you arrive at that action, and are you able to accept the reaction that comes with it. And so the main thing that I really want to talk about when we're going into linear, non-linear, or if you're a mix of both, is your mindset. Are you in fight or flight mode? Because if you're in fight or flight mode, chances are you're going to find someone that is very linear in thought. That's really it's synonymous with tunnel vision, just with a more detrimental twist to it. Like you're literally only looking at your reality. You have that victim mindset, like you're just not understanding why everything is happening to you. You don't have that non-linear scope to where you could look at things and say, while I am understanding that I am I'm the catalyst to everything that has happened to me, I can always be the catalyst for change as well. And that only comes from being able to take that step back, like Dondre said, and being able to look at the entirety of your situation. And so I really think that whether you're in the fight response mode or the flight response mode, it's still a very linear way of thought, and you can gradually, if you choose to, get out of that victim mindset and change that reality. But in the same time, I think if you're in a profession like Dondre said, excuse me if I said DeAndre, but Dondre, and everyone in here, I think there is a culmination of both linear and nonlinear. I think that you really have to be a dreamer, and to be a dreamer, that is a non-linear way of viewing things in itself, because you're seeing a greater vision, a greater future reality for yourself that has not yet arrived. And it takes a daring person to see that, but then it takes the linear gift that every human being has to be able to create the process for it. When you're creating process, that is a very linear way of thinking, because you have to create steps to get there. You can be a dreamer, everyone is a dreamer, but if you're not creating a plan, and that is the key part, if you're not creating a plan, then you're just a dreamer. You'll constantly keep looking at your dreams and figuring out why they're not coming to me. We're deep in this spiritual evolution phase of life, to where people are constantly throwing down words of affirmation or manifestation, but they're not understanding that there's still the linearness, that need for discipline, that need for process to get there. And so I think it is, in myself, a very unique gift, because I've been a very nonlinear person at times. Like, I've always wanted to look at all these other avenues, but if you're only ever looking at all these other avenues, right, you have all this information, you have all this wisdom that you've attained from looking at other people, but if you're not learning from other people's mistake, and when it comes time for you to make these own plays on your own, and you're making the same mistakes, you have all this knowledge, all this wisdom, but you don't know how to apply it to benefit your own life. And so I really think that it is very, very important to, be a reasonable hybrid. I have no problem with people being more linear than non-linear, because they're very process based. My mother is a very linear person. Like, when Dondre was talking about, go to school, get a job, I want that 6-figure salary. That's salary. That means you have, like he was saying, you have to go to school, you have to meet somebody's requirements, and you have to be selected. But the non-linear version of me, like Mars and I was having a very powerful conversation about day trading. Like, I want to naturally gravitate towards that. I want natural progression to where everything is mine. Like, even with what we do as the breakdown crew, we can all be dreamers, and want every listener to dive in, enjoy every single piece of conversation we have. But if we're not putting in the production work on the back end to make sure that the conversations are of the utmost powerful, then people will never really resonate with it. We're just a trio of guys that have some trauma or maybe some insight, and hopped on a podcast, Zoom, whatever it may be, and started talking. So it's very important to realize your viewpoint. And again, we're not just talking about from professional and personal standpoint. You also have to see how your children view life as well. Like, I remember being a child, and I know every black child can relate to this. If 2 + 2 is 4, your mom sitting there, she frustrated, she just got off work. 5 + 5 is what? And you say 9, and she going upside your head, or she just like, how are you getting that answer? And it's just like, some children, and adults as well, because I always say adults are just grown-up children. They've never graduated from how they learn. They've just evolved. So they're still learning things in the way they did as a child. There's just a more refined process, hopefully, for it. But it's like, some children, they need those physical, and I know, Josh, you can definitely relate to this, in the therapy world. They need those physical prompts. Like, they need physical prompts, physical factors in life to make sense of things, and then you can graduate from it. Some people just, they look at the children, it's like, these things make sense to me. Why is it not making sense to you? And it's so easy to get caught up in your way of thought, and it becomes that no matter how nonlinear you are, the second you start questioning why somebody is not seeing something the same way you see it, that is a very linear train of thought. You're not adapting to what the situation requires. And so again, I think it's very, very important to like figure out what you are. If it's a personality test you need to take, or if it's just therapy. I think all of us have spoken very highly of therapy and what it can do to open up other dimensions of your brain to where you're understanding your traumas and being able to reconcile those traumas so you can see a clearer future. Because again, future doesn't mean anything if you haven't addressed the past, because your future is just going to be a bunch of repeating your past, whether it be the same exact things or it be the same thing disguised as something else. So it's very important.
Desmond, you should have. I don't know why you did not become a psychology major, man. I'm a psychology major now, and you're just saying a bunch of stuff that's in the books by philosophers. So, and this is you're saying a lot of stuff that I say all the time. We gotta link up. We gotta.
I'm on it. I'm on it.
So the reason that I drew the connection between today's discussion and principles was because in that book, Ray talks about linear versus non-linear. And then so he also has a blog post. I'm actually going to drop it in the Zoom chat. You can look at your leisure, in which he talks about very briefly the two viewpoints. And so in me answering the question, my thought process is sort of very skewed towards being very non-linear, and then in my late teens, early 20s, leaning and shifting slightly more linearly because I had to adapt processes and strategies, systems in order to be successful. And now I find myself trying to incorporate pieces from both sides of that. If you look at the post that I just shared here, for example, there's several different categories on either side, and I don't find myself strictly on one. So for example, it has on the left brain is more logical, right brain is more emotional. Okay, I definitely say I'm more logical than emotional. It's not even close. But on the right side, it has artistic and creative. I'm more artistic and creative than I am math minded. I can understand math, but it doesn't come to me as innately as art and creative endeavors. And so I think all of us really, I think every human, we all have a healthy blend of both. We have one predominant side that we might lean towards, but we have one that we can foster and learn how to adapt to supplement, because we are fully capable of doing both. It's just what's more natural to us. So I think in my personal life, I find myself to be in the stage where I am more integrated and trying to balance and find a path forward by using the best of both traits and not fighting myself. So I thought about it in this way. On a team, I can do both. And what I mean both is I can be in a very creative space, or I can organize and put structures in place to do things. I find it very difficult, however, to do both at the same time. So that's when I need people like Josh. That's when I need people like Dez to help me out, because like I said, I can do either or, but when it comes to me putting both, let's say I have a creative idea, a creative initiative I want to start. Okay, well, I need somebody to help me out with the more linear, the more logistics, the more concrete type of things. Or let's say Dondre hits me up, he has an idea, I can help him with coming with the logistics, where I can help with that. So it's really about awareness of self, and I think that has been the biggest challenge for me as of late, is trying to walk that fine line and then find individuals who can help me in my weak spots and make the best of those opportunities. So I think I'm not surprised. Like, I pretty much can forecast that Josh, you probably have your answer's probably some mixture of the two. Yes, you're on mute.
How did I put my... Before Josh goes, I'm glad you said as you got older, because I think I don't even want to, like I said, this season we're speaking indefinites. As a parent, when you start thinking about foundational building, you start thinking about your kids and their processes, like what you see them accomplishing. It's very easy to get trapped in that linear way of thinking. Like, without a doubt, like foundation building, like when you're thinking of yourself, and I know you're, talking about, getting a crib and here shortly, if you haven't already. like when you start thinking about those foundational pieces, man, like it's so easy to get caught up in a linear way of thinking. Like it almost takes, and I'm glad you were talking about the importance of a team. Like it is super important to have a team of diverse individuals like we have here, with the breakdown crew, or even like your partner. Like sometimes you need that partner that is the exact opposite of you to be able to, serve as your checks and balances, to make sure that you're not just looking at one scope or one reality, and that you're looking at all things. Okay, if I move to New York, I'm gonna be in New York City, right? But are you factoring in taxes? Are you factoring in all these different things, these school systems, transportation, quality of life? Are you looking at all of these things, or are you just looking at New York City, the bright lights, Broadway, all these things, like hoping that you can fit in? Like you really have to have that team. And I'm realizing that more now than ever. Like Mars, like, we definitely clicked on, having kids at 22, the need to have a community.
Yeah.
And that community can be, your family, can be your friends, but you need to have those people that keep you in check. Because I'll be honest, when you get into a linear way of viewing things, and you kind of just like, man, I'm so tired of following these processes that I didn't set out for myself, whether it be laws or just things that maybe your leader has set out. Like I've said on an earlier episode that, if you do not have discipline, you'll be subjected to those that do. And it's like you reach a point to where it's like, man, you just want to break this cycle, but you're just so bogged down in this fight or flight mindset, that sometimes you need to be checked. You need to be reeled in. You need somebody to be like, what is your reason for doing this? Does this make sense? And so community, my dad had to check me today. Community is a very, very key component in progression of thought.
Let me just jump in real quick, but you said something very, very important about that, though, about just to add to community and that support. The person opposite of you, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's your accountability, right? That's your, hold on, bro, that might not be the smartest idea, right? You're conscious, because let's just say this, even group, if we're talking about the same like your relationship partner, mm-hmm. Most people just crash and burn. Y'all end up homeless together because y'all was trying to chase the same drug. Y'all end up, like, wait, because if the other person was like, nah, I don't want a drug, I want to go do this and do that. Now you clash, and now you start thinking about it, right? Yeah. And then one person's gonna get to do what they need. But if you both are doing the same thing, especially in groups, you end up with what? Cults. Everybody drink the Kool-Aid. Nah, ain't nobody here to speak the gospel that we were talking about, right? You see what I'm saying? So it crashes and burns when you don't have the opposite of that. Just even if the opposite person, you don't go that way when they object to what you're saying, it still gives you a second to sit back and think about it a little bit more.
For sure.
Gives you time to prepare for the consequence, or at least have a contingency plan. I think that is very well timed. I do want to, actually, I want to hear what Josh has to say first, but I do want to circle back to this point. Don't let me forget Mars.
Yeah, I'll go. But you was right, Bryan, basically, as far as a little bit of both. But when I first saw this question, I immediately thought I view the world more nonlinear. And when I think of a linear worldview, I'm thinking of a person having a straight, narrow view of how life is supposed to go. And usually that means growing up in two loving parents in a nice house, growing up and going to college, and then graduating and getting a great paying job. And that could go with how we perceive what normal is in society, but many people don't actually have that or go through that normal worldview. I mean, people are raised in single parent households. People grow up in poverty, barely being able to eat. People graduate from college and aren't able to get a decent paying job. And you might even go to jail at some point in your life. Who even knows? Something minor. And when our lives don't go down the path of normal, that usually creates some type of mental traumas. So that's why I say that. But I think I'm more non-linear due to more understanding that life doesn't go in a straight line. And whether it was experience or my thought process, I thought I always used it to understand certain problems exists in life and in society, and also understand that these problems can cause the path of life to go not in a straight line, but it basically bend, kind of what Mars is talking about in the forest. But at the same time, I'm like what Des was talking about when it comes to being partly linear as well. I do believe I'm that, and it goes back to basically everything he really said. Yeah, and I think for me, it took me a little time to get a hang of the linear aspect, and that was because during the process I would fall back into the non-linear and imaginative mind state. So that's why I really say I'm more non-linear, but I do have parts of linear too.
My good brother, I know you're not I know you're not about to just like going to jail and then saying something minor.
Hey, it can happen. Shit happens.
I thought Des was gonna bust a blood vessel.
My man say, you might go to jail, something minor.
Yeah, shit happens. Shit, what is it? In Virginia, you can get a reckless driving ticket and possibly go to jail. You never know. Shit.
Yeah, Virginia's that Commonwealth. Commonwealth, bro.
Josh, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you say you started off more non-linear?
Yes.
And what gave you that? What allowed you to arrive to that conclusion?
Just the way, like, from my earliest memories of how I view the world, in a more of an understanding view of how things basically go. I don't know if that was because I grew up black, but I just think it goes back to what I said in a previous episode about just me growing up knowing the value of morality. So with me knowing the value of morality and then seeing a whole bunch of immoral shit happen in society, I'm able to understand, why does this happen? So and I've basically been like that for as long as I can remember, really.
You said grew up black.
Josh is on one today.
Yeah, he is.
A Netflix special.
Yeah. Somebody need to pay the man.
I
He's been on the roll, even with the shorts on YouTube, man. He's tapped into a different.
Speaking of that, any one of you guys got a red bandana or blue bandana for a skit?
Oh Lord.
I'll take your ass to the beauty store.
No.
Hey, yo.
Man.
Can't tell you what flag I got until I see yours. I can't tell you what flag I got till I see yours.
The funniest thing is that last week it was a durag, and this man Bryan gonna say he gonna ask a bald man if he got a durag.
I wasn't even thinking about it, but I knew you had braids, so I was like, oh, he might have a durag. So let me
Sat there and stared at the phone for a hot minute, like, yo, this man's serious.
But no, I definitely expected Josh to say nonlinear. Like, we used to have some of the craziest conversations, like not in a bad way, but when we were just thinking about prior thought leaders, like we even, touched Hitler for a second, like just trying to we understand all the negative with Hitler. We live in a universe of duality, so there's always going to be a positive with some negative. And we went down paths that touched before, like obviously his switch to where he just wanted to decide that the Jews were the cause for all their suffering. But I mean, we even tapped into like just art and like, because Hitler was really big into art. We just tried to like factor in like even with the Malcolm X as well. I think from prior episodes, Malcolm X is Josh and I's number one thought leader. But even with back to Hitler, like we were trying to sit here and say like, okay, if he would not have did this, what would the world have looked like? Just trying to see the magnitude of his thought. Like, okay, he was such a great leader in the way like how he unified the people, but where did the unification and the eventual reality that happened go into left field to where he caused one of the greatest, we'll say second greatest tragedies, because the East Atlantic slave trade is still the greatest tragedy in human history, but we won't go too deep into that. But yeah, like we definitely always try and look at every thought leader, good or bad, and try and find like either flaws in their viewpoint or even pros in their viewpoint. Is like, okay, what good can you take from it, and how can I apply that? Or not even just apply it, like what can you just acknowledge aside from what society has told you is good or bad.
Yeah,
So I definitely expect that from, because I won't talk about it in like a positive light, but I've always been really big into history.
Oh, trust me,
Yeah.
I'm saying that in a funny way because it's a taboo topic that I talk about that throws people left too. I'll just tell you this: Hitler knew who the original Jews were, and so do we. He ain't take us out. The original Jews were black, by the way. When did they become white? But I'm gonna tell you this: Hitler knew he ain't take us out. He wasn't killing black folks. Just want to say that he wasn't killing black Jews. I just want to say that. And also, there's other things. I did the same thing, and people be like, "Whoa, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
Hitler created highways. So I'm not saying he was a good guy. I'm just saying there's a lot of. How about I pose your question differently? If he didn't do what he did in that light, what would we be calling him? Not what would the world look like?
Yeah.
What would we be calling him versus a world dictator? You know, if he didn't eradicate a certain group of people, what else would we be calling him? You know, that's the real question.
I think even when it comes to historical leaders such as him, ones that who are on the unfavorable side, who have done or committed travesties, atrocities, you can look at why they were able to do them as well and learn a lot in terms of recognizing patterns in the future. And I mean, for example, he had probably one of the world's most successful propaganda machines, and he pivoted towards his audience to give them what they wanted. And so that in itself, like you can not like someone, which I'm a firm believer in, and that is an acquired viewpoint. I don't think that it comes naturally to everyone, but to be able to look at someone who you have an obvious disdain for, or someone who you have an obvious point of disagreement with, and then look at what they do well or how they were able to do whatever it was.
And I think the biggest view, like, I don't want to say it's the biggest reason why we would have such like in-depth conversations about it, but Germany didn't become a unified state, I think, until like the late I want to say it's like the late 1800s. And so for them to like fast track into, you know, the empire they were at that time, like that is what really gravitates you to those type of conversations, because as, you know, a minority in America, those are conversations we need to have. Like, we are one of the most divided people as African Americans, whether we choose to acknowledge it or not. But it does boil down to thought. It boils down to how we see each other, how we see the systems that we're a part of, and not being able to have respect for one another's viewpoint. Like I don't want to go too deep into the topic of religion, but when you talk to, you know, some Black Christians about like chakras and, you know, stones and things of that nature, and just understanding the power like of just being grounded with the earth, they look at you like, you know, you done lost your damn mind.
My mother-in-law is a pastor, so trust me, I know.
Like they look at you like you've lost your damn mind, like there can't be another reality or another world of thought that exists. And like, you have to respect those people, not just because society tells you to respect them, and we won't go too deep into that, but just because as a human, I understand your power to have thought, to be a you know, a forebearer of thought. Like that is I won't say it's the most important or most impactful human power, but it is up there.
That's religious linear thinking.
Yes. And I'll say it is a very, very, and I do think it is intentional, but I think it is one of the very, like, nothing against religion. I think it's one of the most beautiful things in the world, because it is a system at the end of the day that provides stability for, you know, a group of people.
And teaches positivity. That's why I said I don't care about any group that's, what, even if I don't believe in it, if they're teaching positivity or morals, then.
But the second it becomes divisive, which I do think, you know, we haven't arrived. We've crossed the finish line, and we're now in the pit lane getting a second set of tires. Like, I think we really have to look back and acknowledge, you know, the flaws in our thinking. Because we talk about reparations, we talk about, you know, just we love to go back to Africa. We love to talk about kings and queens and things of that nature. But let's be honest, that shit is past. Like, no empire has ever, and no group of people has ever been built on what they're like. They've never accelerated to new heights by constantly trying to pull the past with them. Like there has to be a time where we're looking at the future, and like we've been talking about this entire episode, you know, being dreamers, but also being linear, you know, creators of thoughts and processes as well, that can be agreed upon to push us to that new level. Like we have plenty of conversations on this podcast about culture and just how we don't have a true identity. Like even what we look at as culture is not even truly Black culture, but yet we accept it as the norm. So
even what you said about empires, and it's very on brand with the book that I just referenced earlier, Principles, it's well documented that empires rarely last over 250 years. So take the information and do what you may.
hey,
I'm gonna just give it to you.
that's a whole nother conversation. We didn't have that on the docket today. I ain't gonna go into it.
But what we are gonna go into, so Mars and Dondre, you two, as far as I'm aware, you're the only two that are currently in relationships, and I kind of want to see the benefits of what maybe having the other perspective from your partner, or maybe some similarities and dissimilarities, how that benefits your decision making and what you've learned in regards to linear and non-linear thinking from your significant other. For you, Mars, your wife, and Dondre, your girlfriend.
Go, Dondre. I've been talking.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'll do it from a more short-term point of view. I guess what I'll go ahead and start and say is, when you think about the linear and non-linear, there's a way in which, if you've been in relationships before, you think, oh, okay, this is what it's like. I'm not gonna put up with this. This is kind of where you get that metaphorical, like, I won't stand for this. I want someone who does X, Y, and Z. And if you ever talk to me like this, or whatever your triggers are that made the last one go bad, you're like, okay, now I know. Because when you're not in a relationship and you've never been in one, you're like, well, if they hit me, if they cheat, then we're done. Great. You know how to be black and white. There are a lot of other things that come in, smaller things that happen maybe more frequently that could still cause strife in a relationship as well. So what I can say is, when you're in a relationship, you start getting experiences with things that you did not think would bring something out of you. We was talking about being a child, right? Like not healing those things as a child. You didn't think that those things would start coming out and be something that you might need to address. And on a more lighthearted side of things, you might hear something and go, you think what? How did you come? And it could be very obvious to them, but not so obvious to you. So I would say, since this is a new relationship overall, right, comparatively, I would say that in my thinking about it, it's like I have to now think and understand that the same multi-perspectives that I try to apply in things when it was just me still need to be applied when it's two people now in a relationship. And I have to understand that their perspective is valid because it's their perspective. My perspective is valid because it's my perspective. However, that does not mean there's a right or wrong. There's a what works and what doesn't work. And you have to be, I was going to say multidimensional. That's a different topic. You got to be nonlinear in order to understand that you have to find the thing that works for both of y'all. So in relation to that topic, I think that is something that is ever present. Because if you think we figured it all out, no more problems, that's how it's going to be, I can guarantee you that's not how it's going to be, because you're going to change, they're going to change, something's going to happen that's going to force y'all to change if you don't want to. And how you respond to whatever that catalyst is going to determine the nature of your growth together and individually moving forward.
Now, how naturally did that come to you in this current relationship?
That is a more natural now than it would have been years before. But that doesn't take away the weight from what you have to do to adapt to it, especially because you haven't been exposed to everybody. You might not be with someone who you're familiar with from your past or something of that nature. You might not be with someone who is similar to like other people that you've been involved with before, right? So if this is something new, you can't say, well, hey, well, this is how I've done it before and it's worked for me, it needs to work here. That's not applicable in every situation. And so you have to be able to adapt and adjust. And you know what? That might be you starting from scratch. And let me tell you, if you so used to being right and you want to, like, you know what I'm saying, try to keep that going, it's going to hurt you. It's going to bite you in the butt. Sometimes you got to go back and say, you know what? I know nothing. Where can I start? And that's going to be a good point of view for you to move forward with.
That's maturity.
Very.
Mars, what about your insight that you learned from your wife seeing your blind spots?
Dondre definitely hit on a bunch of stuff that made sense. There's no right or wrong when you get into a relationship, period, point blank. And that's any relationship, even when you have a friend, you know what I mean, or a parent, you know what I mean? It's just about problem solving at that point. And I think when you get both people on the same page of just problem solving versus complaining and bringing problems and trying to be right, and which you're gonna fall into anyways, even though you know that, you know, it's just about acknowledging when you get into, dang, I'm trying to be right. Let's just solve this. It's always easier just to just start problem solving when you realize it happens. But sometimes we feel like we're in too deep. But I try to tell people, even as a mentee, you're never in too deep, especially when you're dealing with a relationship. You should always feel able to be like, you know what, my bad, you know, or something like that. But I wanted to use this later kind of as a end drop, but Joshua said something that helps with this as well. Is thinking linear is seeing the world how the world should go, or seeing a situation how it should go. And I think Dondre and Desmond kind of hit on that when they were talking about how you need linear in your life, which you do, for organization and structure, right? But because you organized it and you put structure to it, it's supposed to go how it should go, right? And that's what Joshua was saying. So that's why I really that's why I shun away from linear a lot, you know what I mean? But I feel like that's my want. But as a trying to be a right or a wrong person, sometimes that I get slipped into, I also slip into being linear thinking as well, when not wanting to be. You understand what I'm saying? And that comes with that other side of the brain, the right side of the brain that you brought up, Bryan, from Ryan's article, was emotion. And when we get emotion into things, our morality and our behavior changes. Our triggers change. Like emotions, and you talked about reaction and triggers and all that stuff. And I just created something because I'm planning on teaching this stuff. And it's in the acronym, it's ART, right? You got a reaction, a trigger, and an action, right? The as far as the order, there's no actual order, right? So there's going to be an action, there's going to be a trigger, and then there's going to be a reaction, and that's for both sides, right? And so that's just life. That's how it's going to go. And if you're thinking linear, I think you fall into a lot of traps no matter what, because you're not paying attention to the traps that's right there. So especially in relationships, it's always best to kind of try to adapt and try to problem solve versus, you know, right or wrong. So that's how I look at it. It helps in my relationships that way. Though I must always reiterate, I end up, and both of us do end up in the linear thinking because of, you know, learned behavior, shall I say, learned behavior over time.
Bryan, do you ever have that linear view of thinking when it comes to relationships? It's similar to how what Dondre was saying, like if a girl you're dating has a certain idea about parenting or something like that, and you don't agree. Like, how have you ever dealt with something like that, Bryan? Because I feel like you're the most likely person between me, Des, that you would adapt more of a linear view toward relationships. So I'm just curious.
Have I had a linear conflict?
Yeah.
In a relationship?
Yeah.
I would say more than I would like to admit.
Have you?
How
do you deal with that?
How do I?
Have you solved it? Like, how do you open up to a more of a non-linear way of thinking while in relationships?
Okay, so that's actually a great question. I don't think that
it's getting dark on all of our Everybody getting bombed.
I don't think that that is necessarily the path forward. So there is an idea that I've come across. Jay Shetty talks about. He says you can either be married or right, and I am neither. so, so allow that to inform your perspective of what I'm about to say. But from what I can tell, is that when you deal with any two individuals, there is an emotional aspect to things, and so the other person's reality is just as important as yours. So if you spend your time trying to argue the objective facts, which that is the linear part, that's what I'd be inclined to do from jump. It's like, okay, well, you think this, let me tell you what exactly happened. But when you do that, you aren't answering your partner's needs, and it's self-defeating in the long run because you're trying to be right so much. And so through that experience and then the research that I've done through reading people who study this kind of stuff for a living, John Gottman, in the Gottman Institute, Jay Shetty's book, and several others, but realizing that you need to be able to speak to the other person's reality, because when you're in a relationship with someone, it's your reality and their reality. And so let's say she might be more insecure or might need more reinforcement when it comes to something. It might be something that isn't really a big issue to you, but you knowing the kind of person she is, you do it anyway because you value her feelings. And that's the right way to move forward as far as I can tell.
If you care.
If you care, yeah. And I've found more success with that approach as opposed to trying to argue objective reality, as objective as I can be, with somebody else's, with her perspective of how things are going. And so this is kind of what Mars is talking about, the solution-oriented thing is, okay, well, I understand when I do this, it makes you feel this way. What could I do also to make you not feel that
way? Gotcha. Also, I really had this question for Mars, but really anybody could answer it that has something to say about it. But would you guys say that people who stay linear stay stagnant in life?
No.
I wouldn't say that at all. I think for me, there's some real linear people that become billionaires. Like I can tell you this, Warren Buffett. Sure, Desmond will know. Linear person. Yes. Promise you. Very linear person. And he'll teach you linear. He'll teach you the same thing. Hey, nothing changes. He says this. Nothing has changed since I've been in the stock realm. Nothing has changed, right? And so there's people that can do it, and that's just like I told Dondre. That's dedication.
But is he more, because it seems like he does sprinkle in a little bit of nonlinear in there, because can you make it to be Warren Buffett if you don't sprinkle a little bit of nonlinear in there?
Oh yeah.
Because what I'm saying is like a person that just stays linear from the jump, don't have an ounce of nonlinear in them.
Well, I'll say this. Bryan said earlier, like, I think we all have both. I don't think we can ever not have both, right? Now some people are more than others. You probably got that 95% of one and then 5 of the other. But regardless, like I'll tell you this, if you ever wanted something in life, whether booty, drugs, alcohol, going outside, partying, if you really wanted it, you was gonna go do it. And that's linear thinking, right? And that's everybody. Anything that you actually want, you'd be able to go do it. That's why you see druggies that are homeless. They'll go get that drug, but they won't go get a job. They'll get all this money for that drug, but then they'll still be there tomorrow, right? And I think everybody has some of both, but I think more linear people, like really, really linear people, I think there is a group of stagnancy, but the stagnancy is the key for them, right? The stagnancy is the dedication, right? And I don't think Dondre would have lost 78 pounds if he didn't wake up the next day and stay stagnant in what he did yesterday. You see what I'm saying? And I sometimes I wish I was more linear, right? Kind of how what Bryan said, he needs linear people to help him organize when he has that creative idea. And I'm the same way. Look, you can see my notes, it'll be full of ideas, but I also have a friend that helps me put them to use and to go, right? And so I think to answer your question fully, in either side, you can get stagnant, right? I think to be quite honest, but I think linear thinking really just depends.
Gotcha.
I really do think
Hold up, Bryan. Were you about to say something, Des?
I was gonna say, I definitely agree with what he said, that, you know, a lot of the mavericks in life are very linear. Like, things have to be their way. Like, if their eggs ain't made a certain type of way, the whole house feels their wrath. But I think on the other side is, like, if you have a completely non-linear person, you get a Kanye, like someone that genuinely loses their mind in a great way. Like, I love Kanye, even this version of him now. Like, I understand. I don't have to agree with everything he says, but I understand. And I think someone who is very non-linear, but is also in the field that he is, like, you're very prone to losing your mind chasing the dream that you have. Like, if there's no
everything, chasing everything.
Yes. Like,
I said trying to entertain rich white people.
You could literally, if that's how you want to summarize it, I have no problem with accepting that viewpoint. But I'll definitely say like, him literally trying to be the perfectionist of every single avenue that he went into, and wanting to do it his way, like, it breeds a level of insanity to where he without a doubt lost his mind chasing his version of his genius. And I think that is a very non-linear way of doing things. Like, I mean, some may argue that it was his genius of losing the contract with Adidas because it was structured unfairly. Like, some people would say, yeah, you're a dumbass for losing $2 billion in valuation. But then some people may say he's been complaining about Adidas for the past 8 years, and him saying those comments led to a mutual termination of that contract where you both go your separate ways. Like, granted, there were a lot of things like with the you know, JP Morgan Chase, like, freezing the accounts and all those things. Like, there's always going to be, you know, fallout to somebody doing something the abnormal way. But there are definitely multiple examples of non-linear people accumulating success and losing their mind in the process. But then you have your mavericks that get their success and they burn every bridge in the process, and people are staying with them because of that success. Like, there are a lot of terrible bosses, but they keep getting these promotions, these raises, these opportunities because they're whatever their viewpoint of life, whatever their mechanism of thought that allows them to create these processes and procedures, they work. They fit everybody. And if you don't fit, somebody else is going to come in and fit in. Like, they have no problem with literally viewing you, Dondre, Mars, Bryan, myself as human capital. They have no problem with viewing us that way because there's another Josh on the street, there's another Dez on the street, there's another Bryan. Granted, we're all unique in our own way, but there is someone there to fill your place. And I would say that your very linear thinkers are the people that exploit that and do it over and over and over again, because it's the harsh reality of capitalism. Human capital. Someone always needs a job. Someone always needs to work. Your mavericks that could give a damn about what we think, they have a very linear way of viewing the world. So there's definitely examples of billionaires that are both linear and non-linear and thought, like a you know, culmination of both. But I definitely think that there are a lot of very linear billionaires and even leaders today. I'm pretty sure we can all relate to a leader that is very linear in thought, to where, like, you could be in a damn car accident and it's still an occurrence at your job because you are not at work from 10:30 to 6. So they're definitely there.
I don't disagree that he is non-linear, but I don't know. I think Kanye.
I think I was gonna say the same thing.
Yeah, he's definitely linear, if not a little bit of linear.
Well,
but
that's what
I don't want to. I don't really.
No.
Huh?
I just want to say, like, that goes back to my like what I said earlier. Like, you can be a very big dreamer, but you have to have that dash of linear to create that process. Yeah. So when we look at his end products, those are very non-linear. Like, nothing he does has fit the status quo. Like, everything he's done, in a way, he's been a maverick. Like, he's been someone that has either taken an idea and made it 10 times better, or he's created an idea that cannot be replicated.
Yeah, I agree with that too. So I was gonna. Thanks for saying something, Joshua. Real quick, I was gonna say the same thing with Kanye because I love Kanye. Trust me. And I look at him and when I saw Genius, I kind of understood him a lot more. Right now, him in Genius, it shows you he's very linear in his dedication, but his dreaming is very non-linear. So that's why you see his ideas are crazy non-linear. Right? He's like, I can achieve anything, but then when he figures out what he wants to do, this is what I'm gonna do, and that's the linear Kanye, and that's kind of where I think he turns insane more. And then because when he's dreaming, he's happy and he's not doing wild things. But when he narrows in on that dream is when, you know what I mean. That's
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I agree with both. Yeah.
Can I full circle this real quick? Because I have been trying to find the words, and I've been searching for words to put this all together, and it seems like y'all just kind of did it for me. So I really appreciate that. I started this by talking about focusing and zooming out and things of that nature, and everything y'all are saying is just kind of ringing the bell of like, it's not this person is linear or non-linear or anything of that nature. It's the combination of both, and which one they just decide they want to look through, which lens they want to look through at the time. I know, Mars, you talked about just like more of the linear practices I had to employ to even lose some weight, and it's like, yes, there were linear practices I had to do: show up, do the thing, fail, do the thing again, keep going back and forth, break boundaries and barriers and things like that and whatnot. But how I saw myself was someone that linearly people wouldn't have seen if you were looking at me. If you were looking at me linearly, you would have said, he gonna be that way. He gonna eat this food. He gonna do these things. He gonna do. So I had to have a very non-linear perspective of myself, and then apply the linear for it to be more, outside and more visual. Right. I was already the person before I even physically displayed that. And you talk on linearly versus non-linear, and I'm thinking, okay, Bryan, tell me how to start a podcast. Tell me the steps. All the steps you tell me are not because you Googled some article and wrote it out for me. It's because you did the thing. You guys came together, started something, had to adjust. You couldn't have predicted COVID. Y'all got on Zoom. You couldn't have predicted the format of how you would do the things. You figured out what worked, didn't work. You couldn't have figured out or predicted certain issues that would have happened with posting on YouTube, or how long of the content do we need, or are we going to be able to do our own things, and how are we going to get merchandise. The practices that you employ are linear, but that non-linear way of thinking is, well, we can't really meet up because one of us might have the row. So how do we still talk without being able to be physical? Great, we got to adapt. That's a non-linear way of thinking. And all those big tycoons that you guys were talking about, if you look back at the history, Warren Buffett invested consistently every single time and did these businesses and had these practices. But as he's doing the thing, he still had to read the report. He still had to think about how these companies would be in the future 10 years down the road and whatnot. So he still had to have a non-linear way of thinking with linear practices. I hope I'm not talking too fast because I just caught myself. But point of the matter is, I think that there's a duality between the both. And when you employ your highest power in either one, I think you see great results.
I want to further expand upon the relationship between the two. And
Man, that was masterfully said, though. I'm sorry. I want to hear your wisdom, but what Dondre just said was
one more time, please. That's gospel.
Yes, sir.
My boy, it's so gospel that I don't recall what I said. We're going to go back in the recording because.
Oh no, I heard it. Employ your wisdom or energy.
Yes, bro.
That was
it.
You gotta be your best self in whichever self you choose to be in the moment. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's because if you could be the worst of everything. You know what I'm saying? You could have the best intention, but do it in the worst way, or the way that don't work for you or whatnot. You got to be that best self for yourself. Yeah, that's good stuff. I appreciate it.
So where a lot of people jump the gun with, so I think there's an implicit bias of people thinking that things that are linear are by default inferior or to be fought against. So just think about a world with no order. And so back when I went to go see Dr. Jordan Peterson talk, he talked about the bifurcation of the brain between chaos and order, the right and left hemispheres, and this bleeds heavily into what we're talking about today, whether it be linear or non-linear thinking. And so there's a book that I had read called So Good They Can't Ignore You, and I think that is Cal Newport. But anyhow, so he talks about different examples of individuals who became masters of their craft, and through that they were able to open up other opportunities in what they were able to explore. And so that seems to be a much more sustainable route, because people think that discipline is restriction, when in fact discipline is actually freedom. And when you understand that properly, you have a whole perspective change. You understand that if you are able to, for the first 4 years for your degree, whatever that degree is, okay, you could complain about the stuff you learn, or you could fully immerse yourself in it, and then you could find the opportunity afterwards to branch out. A lot of people actually, their current jobs aren't directly in line with what they went to school with. That's very common. But first, you have to acquire some kind of skill and be good at something. And I think that that's a lot of arrogance among youth. I mean, as young individuals, we tend to be more arrogant, and then age and age experiences us and gives us wisdom. We understand that we really didn't know anything, and so once we understand that, that also changes our perspective. But like I said, first you have to become good at something, and then opportunities will be presented to you in order for you to be able to be non-linear and branch out. A lot of people just want to jump the gun and go straight into being this multi tycoon that does everything and does everything great, but they're not a master at any one thing. You have to
Can I ask a
respect the
question with
process.
that, Brian?
Right.
Because how you're saying that, it's kind of, they jump the gun in thinking how they think linear is, right? So would you say that linear has at least when we're talking at it, when we say linear or nonlinear, when we give a person a decision, would people think linear has a negative connotation?
I think people have a problem with linearity in general, like with systems. So the systems that are in place, is very easy to critique them, in which we definitely should critique our systems for the sake of improving them. But I think a lot of people implicitly, because they have to do something, when they don't understand the why, they are more prone to critiquing and rebelling against the fact that they have to abide by some sort of linearity. And so, if you have a much more informed perspective, you can appreciate, okay, I might not want to take this specific class, but I understand if I want to be an optic nerve surgeon, I have to take this class because it might be important. Like there's certain prerequisites when it comes to skills, not only in the educational sense, but there are prerequisites of knowledge when it comes to us doing things. And so when you have a full picture, understand why this one thing you're doing is important, it's much easier to stomach and comply with, as opposed to thinking that you can just skip it.
So then it does, especially when organization. Yeah, I can see that. Especially, I mean, 2020 shows you that we had to stay home, we had to wear masks, stay 6 feet.
Like, a lot of people will fight structure just because
it's structure.
Well, not only that, it's structure that they did not come up with. It could be right, but some people, a large population of people, will fight things that are right because they did not come up with it. It's like an innate sense of rebellion.
Did you read that somewhere, or did you just think of that?
This is the amalgamation of different things that I've read, different things that I've seen. I can't say it's one specific source, but
that's a psychological thing.
Yeah,
it's a psychological thing.
It's echoed in a lot of different books, and I mean, just through general experience, you can look at code for a perfect example that Mars was saying. Just look at how people behave. A lot of things that people were saying were common sense. Were okay. There was an illness that people were unfamiliar with. Social distancing. Maybe just back the fuck up when I'm in the grocery store. You shouldn't be like You shouldn't be like right behind me.
Anyways, right?
Exactly. But people like
to this day, I still, when somebody's on me, to this day, I'm like, yo, we still social distancing, bro.
It's great for people that don't like being people near people.
I swear. And it's just like,
we still social distancing.
Common sense things, and people did not do because they were being told to, such as like a mask when you were sick. I could understand, okay, maybe you don't want to wear a mask. I mean, I didn't understand it when it was at its full peak, but okay, let's say now. You should definitely still wear a mask if you're sick. Like, if you were going into public with like a viral cough, like you up here hacking a lung up, why are you out in post office 6 feet in front of me just blowing, like huffing that stuff? It's just,
You forgot about the big one though.
What's
The washing hands, the
Yeah.
video for washing
Should've
hands.
just been doing that anyways, right?
It increased. Like people didn't know how to wash their own hands, so like the video views increased. Like, oh shit, that's how you wash your hands? Okay.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
we see how, and then I think this is also a cultural phenomenon when it comes to rebelling against system, structure, and order. When you look at, if you just want to look at the mask phenomenon, so Desmond, you lived in Japan for a number of years as a result of your parents being in the military. When people were sick, they wore masks. This is something that everyone knows. When they're sick in Japan, they wear a mask.
Asian culture for years.
Yeah, I have never seen anybody wear a mask in public unless they were maybe cutting grass and didn't want to like, inhale the pollen or something like that. Like I only seen landscapers up until COVID. But then even now, you'll see people out in public acting like it's nothing for them to be having bronchitis, the newest strain of that, and hacking up a lung. Like I said in the post office, like it's just strange to me. And it's uniquely us. It's a cultural thing, and we value our individuality over the whole, and there's pros and cons to both. And as a consequence of that rampant individuality, we see less compliance when it comes to laws, orders, mandates, and systems of that and things of that nature.
I'm gonna throw out while everybody's kind of quiet there, pondering on the deep wisdom that you dropped for us, Bryan. There is duality in that as well. There is absolutely no. You have your individuality, as in I'm not telling you to wear that hoodie for this podcast or something. I can't stop you from doing that. But for you to say you are your own, separate from the whole, separate from the holistic, separate from all that is, it's false. And no matter how you look at it, you do have an effect. Your energy speaks volumes regardless of what type of energy it is, right? So it makes sense. If it's not you doing something in a team, maybe it's you affecting how your siblings or how your parents think about something, or how they interact with you, or the type of work that you do, or things of that nature. Even if you look at people who are pioneers in what they did, and you might think the lesson we pull out in this Western world is like, you got to be individual, because they were individual. They didn't listen to what people said would work and what didn't work. And it's like, also keep in mind, nobody would if nobody cared, they would just kind of be doing their own thing on the side. And like any great artist or musician or something like that, like they're talented, sure, uniquely they are talented, but it took someone to receive that talent for them to be known. Right, so there is no uniqueness in
to co-sign
in
on
the
it.
whole. Exactly. I can't give you your talent, but I can receive it. I can speak volumes to it, and therefore, otherwise, you can be. This is just me off a tangent. There was a video of a world-renowned violinist playing their violin in a subway.
New York subway.
Yeah, playing that in the subway. People are passing him, don't give a damn about it. Yet people pay, paying out full stadiums or whatever they, orchestra buildings, stuff like that, to listen to this man. Like, that's the complete duality. He's an individual. He's the pioneer of his craft, sure. But if there's no one there to receive it, you can't be individual and succeed in that nature without someone there to receive. So that's why I'm just saying it just kind of goes both ways. I didn't give you your talent, but I had to be there to receive it for you to be known for the talent.
That's even bigger psychological thing. Is no one's famous. Right? We'll talk about our celebrities. First of all, we make celebrities. We make icons. They don't make themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then also with that as well, we are told who is a celebrity too, half of the time. Because a platform like LMFAO, I know you guys are in that time. You know LMFAO, right? These guys came out of nowhere. They made a couple of tracks that were just everywhere, and then they disappeared. You wanna know why? Because they were the top tier of Rockefeller Records grandsons, right? And we were told, hey, look, these guys are the best in pop right now. Here's their new singles, and y'all gonna rock to it, because they had every platform they could imagine, right? And so they make us celebrities, and we'll make them celebrities, right? Because they gave them the Coliseum, right? If we played in the Coliseum and they told us that we was gonna be a boy band, I'm pretty sure we could sell some tickets today. You know, but it's just, that's another thing to about psychological, kind of what Bryan was the rebellion and the need to be accepted too.
That's fair.
That's a really interesting point you bring up with. I don't know about that group and their relation to the Rockefellers, but when you do have a machine behind you, so exactly what you were saying, where we were told who's popular. Okay, well, we're told by how many times we hear the song on the radio. I don't listen to radio anymore, but I remember they only ever kept like 6 songs in rotation at any given point in time. And so this is what has the most money behind it, gets the most spins. You're gonna hear this the most. This is what they are really trying to push. And these songs are concocted formulaically. You have record A&Rs, you have producers, like you have everybody coming together, and it's a campaign. It's propaganda, really, to get you hooked on it and make the most money. And so it's just a consequence of predetermination. This is who we want to promote. This is who we want to get. We have the best chance of getting our return on, and these are the resources we're going to provide to this individual.
You definitely know the group. They made the party rock song.
Yeah, party rock. You know party rock. Come on.
Yes, I do.
Oh, come on. What's the other one? They got.
Sorry for party rocking. They were just nothing about party rock.
I'm sexy and I know it.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
I have to hear it.
Bro, I think they were like, you remember like the Kia Soul or something like that? Like I
Not
think
the Kia Soul commercial.
Yeah. See, but you see what I'm saying? Like they were the biggest thing for like at least a whole year, man.
You guys have anything else, Bryan? Yes.
Nah, this was a slam dunk.
All right. You have a recommendation of the week?
I do. So, as you all know, for the listeners, I'm big into Audible, so I did get my 1 credit. I actually got it last month, but I just made a purchase recently, and it is the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I just started listening to it. I'm loving it so far. It's really in line with what we talk about on the podcast, but of course, I'm not taking anything away from Naval Ravikant, but it is definitely worth the listen. It's something that I've seen a lot of people recommend on social media, and it goes into wealth and health and wellness. So health, wellness, and wealth, we'll say it like that. That's a fantastic trio. So yeah, give it a listen or read, whatever you do.
Okay, nice. I want to thank Mars for coming on the show. First time. It was a pleasure. Dope conversation. And of course, you're part of the Infusion Network family, so come back. We'll love to have you back.
Thank you guys for having me. I hope I'll come back because you guys this is the kind of space that I want to be around. So yeah, I love you guys' insight. Every single one of you. Appreciate you guys.
Blessings.
Yeah, no problem. And Dondre, this is like your 20 billionth time hearing this, but thank you for coming on the show.
Our resident guest.
Yeah, a veteran of the Infusion Network. So thank you for coming back. Of course, you're always invited. It was a great conversation. So looking forward to any future collaboration. Yeah, of course.
Well, but years down the road, I hope we get to look back, and see the non-linear way that this whole thing progressed. You know what I'm saying?
Right?
No doubt. Yeah. If you guys liked the discussion, don't forget to hit the like button. And of course, share it. Why not? We're going to see you guys next week. Peace.